I think it's fair to say most people know you for a variety of reasons. I think, like, obviously you were an athlete, then you are also a commentator, broadcaster, and you're also a coach. I think starting off in athletics, how did it come to be? How did you find the sport?
Just a long time ago, back in the 70s, more schools probably did a bit of athletics, and I was playing football more at the time. My uncle was actually a professional footballer. That's what I thought I wanted to do. But you go to senior school and they make you do cross country. And so I went out and did in a couple of cross country things within the school, got picked for the school team to run against other schools, did okay. That was my first bit of running, but nothing kind of came of that so much until the following summer. Now you move into track season. And I was running the 400 meters actually for my school. I didn't like running a long way back then.
Not 55 miles.
And the guy who was the coach from the local athletic club saw me and asked me to join. I didn't even know there was an athletic club, Jarrow and Hebden Athletic Club, which had been there since 1938, and I didn't even know. And he asked me to join the club, and that's how it started.
The rest is history. Were the rest of your family into athletics?
Yeah, my dad will tell you, he was a policeman, he'll tell you that he was a good runner in his day. My mum, bless her, my mum was German.
Oh, okay.
But on her side, the family, actually I'm going to Germany in a couple of weeks to see the family for Christmas, but my uncle, one of my uncles was a semi-professional footballer, but he reckons he used to be a good runner as well. So there was various uncles and aunts who claimed it was their genetics, but yeah, I'm not sure anyone was. It must come from somewhere because there's something gets handed down, doesn't it?
I think what's really interesting about you is actually for the 1500 meters, you're actually the first ever world champion over 1500 meters. That year was 1983, right?
Yeah.
Did you talk me through that year, just in the build up to that?
It's really challenging, I guess, to explain to people the environment that we were all in then. So it was the first World Championships. We hadn't had one. The Olympic Games were our global, but the Olympics were in a fair bit of bother then. There'd been a boycott in 76. There was another boycott in 1980. I went to the 80 Olympics as a 19-year-old, but the boycott and the Olympic movement was in a bit of trouble. So track and field, the International Athletics Federation, took the view that it needed to create its own global championships. And there were all sorts of ideas to begin with. And at one point, it was going to be kind of the top 50 ranked athletes. It didn't matter which country you're from. So not to make it different from the Olympics, it would be 3 per country.
That's interesting, actually.
It wouldn't be 3 per country. It would be just the top 50. Then that kind of got changed as there was lots of power struggles going on. So at one point, there was another boycott in '84 as well. And at one point, they were threatening that the Olympics would be only for under 23 athletes. So to make the World Championships the real number one event.
Yeah.
So I think we ended up with a pretty similar format to the Olympics, top 3 from each country, and went down that route. But it was a brilliant success. So you have to remember that was the first. Since the early 70s, for 10 years, it was the first proper global championships that everybody went to. It didn't matter which country, there were no boycotts. Everybody was there, and it was initially every 4 years as well. So it was a real privilege to win the first one. I was only 22.
That's what I was going to say as well.
But, we had these 2 guys called Seb Coe and Steve Ovettin. Everyone knows Seb now these days, but, the 2 of them had set targets for me. They were sort of 4 or 5 years older than me, but I was very good at 17, went to the Commonwealth Games, 19 the Olympics. And then through 81, 82, I was improving fast. In 82, I won the European Championships, I won the Commonwealth Games, started challenging those 2. And so in 83, I stepped up another level. But then I had a couple of new rivals come in, a guy called Saïd Ouita from Morocco and Steve Scott of the US, who almost broke the world record just before the World Champs. So there was a whole host of, top-level athletes whose times are still up there on the all-time list now. So yeah, it was a great time to be a 1500 meter runner. Hard, really competitive. Some of the best of all time, all running at the same time. So it was, those world champs were tough to win, but it was something which I'm still very proud of, that it was the first world champs. And Carl Lewis did really well in the sprints, and we had also people like Ed Moses around and others. There was a lot of the world's big names, Daley Thompson in the decathlon, for whom those world champs were a seminal moment.
Yeah, you touched on it very briefly, but you were only 22 when you actually became a world champion, which is really, really young.
I had my exam. I graduated that summer as well.
Really?
Yeah.
How did you deal with the pressure of being such a young athlete, but then also becoming a world champion and everybody all of a sudden wanting a piece of you?
So a newspaper coverage was phenomenal, and every newspaper had 2 or 3 athletic correspondents. So the sport was one which internationally as well. I mean, to this day, I still travel Europe, and people of a certain age are going to know what we were all doing in the 80s and in Australia and the US, etc., because the sport was that big. But I think because I'd had, I was on the back page of the Daily Mirror when I was 17. I was still at school. I went to Commonwealth Games and things. So I'd grown up with exposure. So you find a way to deal with it. Everybody has their own way to deal with it. So I really didn't know anything else. And actually I had Seb Coe and Steve Ovett to watch, because they were getting, certainly when I was 18, 19, they were the biggest names in sport in Britain and in some parts of the world.
Yeah.
And so being close to them, seeing how they both handled the media very differently, and you find your way to kind of work through with that. So I think it was more challenging actually for people around me, my mum and dad and family, friends, that sort of thing. I think I found my way to deal with it, but I'm not. I think the impact it has on those around you can sometimes be great, and you don't realise it.
Yeah, it's quite strange, especially for Britain. It was the world record holder, the world champion, and the Olympic champion all at the same time, 3 different guys.
Yeah,
I wasn't alive then when it happened, but was it like Beatlemania?
Yeah, no, I mean, without being funny, I don't know. I wasn't around for Beatlemania. Maybe not quite at that level, but yes, you couldn't go in a shop. You couldn't, without people knowing who you were, and it was nice because everybody was watching. So if I'd flown back from Oslo and I was flying back to Newcastle Airport, whatever, everyone at the airport would be going, "Hey, saw you last night," and it was so. It was very different to now, where not everyone will have seen you competing in the Diamond League the day before, or even in championships. So we had, I'm going to sound like I come from just a different world. There were 3 channels. So to give you an example, in 1985, I broke the world record in Nice. It was live on BBC One and ITV at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah. So the combined audience was nearly 30 million people.
Wow.
So the impact of what you did was huge. So inevitably, the rest of your life is you're under observation to some extent. Thankfully, as I said, I didn't have to deal with social media and the rest of it. Then you could withdraw or engage with it kind of as much as you really wanted to. So you were able to take time to yourself and be as private as you wanted to, and you didn't have to do newspaper interviews if you didn't want to. You didn't have to have photographers following you around. It was hard for people to find out where you were, particularly if you don't tell them. So it was much easier to do that in those days.
How did you find having the 3 of you all being at the top of your game in Britain?
I would not have been as good had it not been for those 2. As I said, they set the bar very high for me. Imagine if I'd gone to the Olympic Games as a 19-year-old and I was the only British athlete in the final. Everyone would say, "Hey, well done, mate. You're doing really well." And but I was 9th and nobody watched. They were watching Corn Ovett at the front, and so I knew that there was 2 things. One is they showed me that what was possible, and also they created a competitive environment just to get, and obviously I helped just to get on the British team. You had to be really, really good just to get on the team. And then you knew what you were going to face when you got the championships. So, without them, and there was other people in Britain at the time. Peter Elliott came through, Olympic medalist, Commonwealth champion. We had a bunch of other lads who were running 3:33, 3:34, never made the team. They just couldn't get in the team.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So different times.
Yeah.